What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and today I got a weird video that's about some things unearthed from a website that deleted an article years ago that might actually explain the mass exodus of fans rejecting ugly female characters in video games these days, as well as how places like Amazon are starting to openly admit why they chase diversity, equity, and inclusion-made content, fully knowing it will fail and lose them money and more. So, let's get started. Firstly, on social media, I was scrolling like I usually do, and I saw a post by Manga Lawyer, saying there was a now deleted article detailing a whistleblower within the gaming industry that explained why Western studios go out of their way to make their female characters uglier on purpose. This piqued my interest, and thankfully someone in the comments, specifically this person here, had a link to the article that was able to archive it. Because, as we all know, the internet never truly forgets anything. And upon reading this article, it became clear that the subject matter here is very taboo, to say the least. It's titled, "Naughty Dog Made Female Characters Less Feminine to Be Trans-Friendly." This article comes from the website sausageroll.com, and like I said, this article was eventually deleted either due to pushback from other journalists or whatever else, I can't say. So of course, I cannot confirm 100% if what was said here is absolutely true, but it's interesting to dissect and read regardless. This article came about around the time The Last of Us Part 2's leaks were all over the internet, which as you probably know led to the entire story being spoiled, Joel dying, and all that other stuff. Anyway, according to Sausage Roll, during that leak they were told some stuff anonymously by unnamed Naughty Dog employees about the game's creation, and why the characters were deliberately stripped of their attractiveness on purpose. One developer said just when it came to the leaks and the existence of Part 2 that, "I don't doubt even for a moment that this leak came from the studio. The Last of Us Part 2 is very divisive, and as you can imagine, some of the team aren't really thrilled to be working on the game." It's never a good sign when someone within a game studio admits anonymously that there's quite a few people on the team that don't agree with the project they're working on. Whether it's the story, gameplay, or characters, it's interesting that the growing divide between what the players want, what the devs want, and what actually happens due to the directors and producers getting final say is very different. And it's not surprising that Part 2 to some degree was not a labor of love for the developers at Naughty Dog. In fact, to some capacity, these devs hated the thing that they were working on. Maybe it was the long hours, the amount of gore that was needed to be witnessed to accurately depict it within game, or all of the above and then some. Sausage Roll then claims they spoke to a highly accomplished character artist who has worked on many AAA games you've likely played. But of course, they remained anonymous because if their identity got leaked and they were found out for saying these things, they'd obviously be blacklisted from the gaming industry. Anyway, according to this unnamed artist, they said the reason why female characters today are deliberately stripped of their femininity is due to agendas. This artist said this new androgynous female character standard is, as he puts it, the new norm. And it's not about the objectification of women, and he makes a point to say that no artist on any project is unaware of the fact that big busty women or massive muscular men do in fact exist. But instead they are deliberately strong-armed into not creating characters that fit these body types. This is where the topic gets a little taboo, so I apologize if I try to make this work for YouTube, but he then says, "If you see a game where the women are a little less curvy, it's not because the game designers are worried about receiving backlash for objectifying women, it's because they are worried about offending the trans community. From a design standpoint, this is a really challenging problem. I've had many board meetings about how to tackle this. Trans people want realistic representation in our games, but they feel excluded if they are represented as too masculine or too feminine. That's why you see a lot of designers nerfing the female form, so to speak, so that the difference between trans women and cis women is a little less noticeable." They even supplied images showing Dina, for example, in The Last of Us Part 2's character model, placed up against the actual model the character is based on, showing how the real-life model clearly has a larger bust size, but it was reduced along with any curviness of the actual model when it came to translating them into the actual game. This then gets supplemented by the previous Naughty Dog source that admitted the developers weren't happy working on the game and said why they made it anyway. According to that source, anyone within these progressive studios are at an insanely high risk of being fired and blacklisted if they question any small choice that is made when it comes to the games in question, especially when these changes involve character depictions, storyline, or woke ideology. This source continues further by saying, The team is very much divided on the game, The Last of Us Part 2, and even voicing your concerns on its story will upset certain individuals. It usually results in said person being called closed-minded or even phobic or some such nonsense. Some people literally have to bite their tongues or fear losing their jobs, even careers, to an outrage mob. This part especially rings true and doesn't surprise me much at all, especially since we are seeing in real time many different games being almost sabotaged from the get-go. In order to appease the modern audience these progressives strive for when, as you know, the modern audience is but a phantom, but that doesn't stop them anyway. The fact female characters are being nerfed, for lack of a better word, on purpose to appease certain groups is not surprising, but also makes me terribly bummed out as well. For example, in Part 2, there's the character of Lev, who's trans. I actually like Lev and find them to be a good character. I personally never truly felt like at any point that Lev is defined by the fact that they're trans. They were, after all, excommunicated from the Scars, which is this religious zealous group they were born into in case you never played it. And Lev, along with their sibling, escaped the Scars because the higher-ups within the Scars are known to take child brides for themselves. And Lev, who was born female but identifies as male, was repulsed by this idea, which is understandable. That their entire existence would be reduced to becoming nothing but an object for an older man to use as they see fit, and of course eventually create more children to usher in new eras for the Scars. I personally find Lev's backstory to be very interesting, and I don't think their existence as a trans person to be bad at all. In fact, in my opinion, maybe a hot take, I don't know, but I found Abby and Lev's dynamic and story to be far more interesting than that of Ellie's and Dinah's. Honestly, I think the part of Part 2's story that everyone seems to universally hate is its ending because Ellie just doesn't go through with her revenge. But the actual plot of Abby and Lev attempting to escape the insane violence around them, considering Abby is a part of the Wolves and Lev the Scars, was actually interesting. Maybe another hot take, but I would have been fine if Abby killed Ellie as well. But that's mostly because I've never been too crazy about Ellie. She was always a side character to me. Joel, obviously, is the best character and the most layered out of anyone. And it's a damn shame Naughty Dog did what they did to him, but what's done is done. And frankly, especially once Part 2 concludes, I don't really ever want to see Ellie, Dina, Tommy, or anyone a part of that cast ever again. If the game just swapped to Abby and Lev and we left behind all those characters, honestly, I would be much more interested in that than ever seeing Ellie again. Because Ellie's decision at the end of Part 2 was beyond immersion breaking. It was downright pathetic and horrifically moronic no matter what justification you attempt to place upon it. But generally speaking, I think the entire story of Part 2 just doesn't work because of that ending. And really, killing Joel to begin with was Naughty Dog's Luke Skywalker or Han Solo dies moment from the Disney trilogy equivalent, where they did the unthinkable by killing a fan favorite like Joel and not really being able to fill that hole with anyone as interesting enough to fix it. And what we're left with is just a lesser game that many frankly wished never existed to begin with. And I feel as if that feeling towards Part 2 can be echoed upon many other games in recent years. Mind you, that Sausage Roll article was written in 2020, and since then the gaming industry has only gotten more pandering, not to mention other industries like comics or more as well. Stuff like the recent Suicide Squad's entire premise is basically The Last of Us Part 2 on steroids. Because not only does our beloved Kevin Conroy Batman die, but so does all our other heroes. And what we're left with is 4 morons that are nowhere near as interesting or likable that are supposed to fill the space left by characters like Batman, for the love of God. And even if we take what that artist said in that article, how studios deliberately make female characters uglier or less feminine or masculine in order to pander to a certain crowd, it's true as well. Look at Harley Quinn and Suicide Squad compared to Arkham Asylum. It's 2 very different distinct looks to the character, and sure, some would say Harley's looking Asylum or City to be too sexualized, but this is Harley Quinn. She's been a sex symbol her entire existence, even back in her origin within the animated series as well. But I think what really bums me out is that these studios are catering to a very small group of potential buyers or players, while also rejecting the mass majority in response. I'm not saying we can't have trans or gay characters. Like I said, Lev is a genuinely good character, and Lev, I feel, falls into the same category of LGBTQ+ characters with someone like Dion in Final Fantasy XVI. And what I mean by that is Lev and Dion are the kinds of characters that can both cater to what these studios want, while also still being compelling characters that don't feel shoehorned into experiences. If you need to go out of your way to tell me these characters are gay or whatever, As in, stop the entire plot and everything, look dead into the camera and yell, hey, they're gay, then it's obviously not being done for the right reasons. And as I've said plenty in other videos, gay people, even trans people, are complicated individuals, the same as straight people as well. Everyone is more than their sexuality or gender, and I feel as if the most important parts of a character isn't what they're attracted to, but their ideals. People, for example, don't love Batman just because he's a man or he's rich. They love Batman because while he doesn't exactly have any superpowers, I would argue Batman does have at least one, and that's his unbreakable willpower. And that will is what makes people, whether you're male, female, trans, white, black, whatever you identify and resonate with, Batman, because he's a character that despite the odds, no matter what's against him, he never gives up. And I personally feel that this character trait is far more interesting and worthy of pursuing when developing stories surrounding a character than what his political leaning is or what Batman identifies as. The point I'm trying to make here is that characters like Batman or Lev or even Clive Rosfield in Final Fantasy XVI, these are all characters that people can resonate with simply because they have indomitable wills that allow them to rise through pain and suffering in order to become something more. And isn't that far more interesting of a character trait than their sexuality? Even when it comes to character designs, can we just be honest and say that turning every character, whether it's male or female, into looking the same, isn't that the antithesis of what diversity is all about? I thought the gaming industry championed concepts like diversity in all forms. Diversity of body shape, skin color, sexuality, or identity. Then if this is the case, why are we getting the same character designs over and over? Why do the female characters look like the male ones too? That is the opposite of diversity, but it's true that like most things, there's also some socio-political agenda attached to it. And I do genuinely believe that we can have straight characters who are curvaceous women or muscular men while also having characters like Lev and so on too. If we truly want to depict the world as it is, then we can't run from the fact that there's more than one body type. And frankly, what this Naughty Dog whistleblower said or the anonymous AAA artist admitted should not continue to happen. And it's obviously clear that when the games these days do depict women and men to be both traditional, beautiful, and strong, it only makes everyone more inclined to engage and enjoy the content. Obviously, the most recent example is Tifa Lockhart in Final Fantasy VII with her massive mommy milkers. But beyond that, the reason why people are so excited for that game, which isn't out yet as of the making of this video, is because Tifa and Aerith are genuinely appealing looking characters. And it's also great because characters like Cloud or Barrett, who are both men, have vastly different physical builds too. That's far more realistic and interesting to me than having everyone look the same. The only example of when every character in a game has a similar model made sense would be the original Mass Effect game. Because back then, BioWare admitted the reason why humans, Turians, Krogans, Quarians, Geth, and so on all have 2 legs and 2 arms is because of software limitations. And they needed each alien body, especially those of recruitable characters, to have similar body types to ensure the different sets of armor in the game could translate more easily between characters, in order to reduce costs and make the game less work than it already was. This is also why in Mass Effect 2 and 3 you can't equip the same armor onto every character anymore, and instead each member was given unique looks and character build were instead relegated to their weapons, abilities, and mods. Because creating one set of armor for multiple different characters or aliens in every game would be a strain on resources and budget. That, to me anyway, feels like a real honest example of body designs being somewhat similar for a reason. Of course, in those 3 Mass Effect games at least, the female and male characters still had curves and muscles to them. So while yes, they had 2 legs and arms due to software limitations, BioWare obviously didn't unsexualize their characters. And while I get the reasoning behind why these studios do these things, because they don't want to create turmoil within very vocal communities, what it ends up doing is stripping these properties of their uniqueness and instead makes many of these games, especially Western ones, all feel the same. And it's no wonder that the best-selling games of 2024 so far anyway are devoid of any of this stuff, and instead focus on just delivering fun gameplay and reasonably priced experiences instead of forcing agenda or bending over backwards to appease everybody. Because it's as you know, if you try to appeal to everyone, you'll end up making a product for no one. Which is why it always confuses me when I see these big AAA games falter when the path they should have took seems so obvious to begin with. Although I doubt making Harley Quinn hot would have saved Suicide Squad, but it didn't help that game by making her ugly and also treating Wonder Woman as the only Justice League member with a respectable death, while making fun of every other character's death in that game, which were all coincidentally men themselves. Even with The Last of Us Part 2, I don't think attractive female-modeled characters would have helped that game's dissonance when it came to its story anyways. If Dina was like her model or Abby was more attractive, it wouldn't save the game from its legendary moronic ending choice or the fact that, Joel gets killed. When everyone and their grandmother just wanted another game where they play as a rotten old man Joel mercilessly killing dudes without remorse. But instead he's dead and here plays a side character who's 100 pounds soaking wet. And it's totally believable that Ellie could kill like 100 people who have nothing to do with her revenge, but then let the actual person go who was responsible for it to begin with. Also, can we just admit that if Ellie did kill Abby and even Lev as well, that the cycle of violence or whatever would have closed the loop? Because nobody left that would be a part of that revenge would be alive, but I guess instead not doing the obvious just makes everything stupider and ruins it. Part 2 is so disappointing, man. I have no hope in a Part 3 being able to redeem anything, and it seems like to me anyway that a Part 3 solely exists to be cannon fodder for hours of video essays once it comes out, and it'll likely divide the fanbase even more. Having attractive female characters wouldn't solve every problem, but it would at least make these games more likely to be bought and supported. And I think going out of your way to make your characters more ugly helps no one. And if this is all because of trans people, why not give that audience attractive characters as well? Wouldn't that help with their self-image more than anything to see a beautiful character that is trans, which would at least give them positive representation? Why make every depiction of a trans character deliberately ugly? I don't get it. Who does that help? It neither helps the male or female groups or any other. If anything, by making beautiful trans characters, it would likely make bridges instead of burning them. It just seems like the entire industry has it all backwards and are refusing to understand or listen. Things can get better for everyone if we just actually talk about it and discuss it instead of feeling as if it's taboo or something. Of course, places like Amazon, for example, admit they make content that is diversity, equity, and index filled or DEI on purpose as well. Even though they know it won't do well for their streaming service, but they think it's a win anyway. According to thatparkplace.com, even though Amazon knows it won't do well, they do it because they are, as they put it, true believers in the cause. And via that source, they said, Amazon apparently manages their DEI strategies from a global annual perspective rather than applying a DEI filter to each show individually. This means that while they prioritize DEI, their definition of success is tied to their overall DEI score at the end of the year rather than for each project. And this then raises the question as to why did these companies make these things while also making stuff like Reacher, for example, on the same service? Apparently, according to that report, stuff like Reacher actually helps keep Prime afloat, while stuff like Rings of Power or Wheel of Time are used to replenish their ESG scores, which is insane to me. So Reacher apparently has an F rating when it comes to DEI, but resonates, and then Rings of Power, for example, didn't even have 63% of its viewer base finish it, but it's successful because of DEI. As you can see from Amazon or this gaming industry report, everything is backwards and not a whole lot of it makes any sense. We would be in a much better spot if things were genuine and made with passion rather than chasing DEI scores or pandering, if you ask me. Anyone, regardless of their identity, deserves quality, and it's clear the gaming industry is not only failing their male and female audiences, but trans ones as well. None of us benefit from what's going on here, and we all deserve better than what's happening. And just to reiterate, I hope this video does not come malicious against any one group, as I genuinely do feel as if the gaming industry and many others abroad are failing us all equally. We don't need our characters to be made ugly in order to appease trans audiences, because the fact that of all the things they could have done in order to appease those groups, their solution was to make characters uglier on purpose seems actually hateful in my opinion. If you really wanted to represent that group and give them proper representation, then you do the exact opposite of whatever it is they're doing right now. It's incredible the gaming industry correlates ugly with a certain group and doesn't realize how problematic that really is. They just believe they're the saviors and are just in their crusade without realizing how awful they really are being. Whether it's franchises like The Last of Us, Batman Arkham, or any other, it's clear what these devs and studios believe are solutions have done nothing but make things worse. There has to be a course correction before it's too late, and I do think it can still be fixed, but not like this, man. Anything but this. But who knows? Maybe the fat milkers of Tifa Lockhart will spring some common sense into the industry's head? And maybe Reacher will push DEI to the curb more than usual. As always, time will tell. Let me know what you think, and like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thanks to my patrons as always, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next one.